It is the Good Contractor Podcast. It's episode 6. That is Luke Hansen, CEO of CompanyCam. I'm John Talman, just a humble blue-collar worker at CompanyCam that works for Luke.
Doesn't like Jack Johnson.
I'm not really a huge Jack Johnson
Which is a problem.
fan. We're going to ask Paul if he likes Jack Johnson, but this is all a subjective conversation, and it's not about what you like and what you don't like. Let's not judge other people, Luke. That'd be great. Can we do that? Can we do that on the podcast today? Or maybe we'll judge what somebody... we're going to tell Paul this. Luke has spent time with our last two guests arguing over whether Colorado is in the Midwest or the West, so we're going to get Paul's takes.
That's not true.
Yeah, it happened.
The mountains are where the West begins. If you are east of the mountains, you are not in the West, you are in the Midwest. Look at a map. They're right in front of you. They publish them on the internet.
I think there's a deep psychological thing about why you're so passionate about this, and we can unpack that later, okay, Luke? Like we can lay on the couch.
We'll get it straightened out.
And we'll tell some stories. But we have Paul Jamison. Let me read all these lists of credentials and see if I can embarrass him. I mean, this guy has 3 million plus downloads on a podcast that he's created with the Green Industry Podcast. He's an author. He's a business owner. He's a coach. Done a lot of amazing things. And I'm really excited for Luke to hear a little bit more about his story and how, like all of us kind of getting out of college, it's like, what am I going to do with my life? And then to see the turns and... you know, nothing in life is a straight line, but it's just so cool to hear his story about how he got from A to B. And so we welcome in Paul Jamison to the Good Contractor Podcast. Paul, how are you today, sir?
Good. How are y'all doing?
Doing fantastic.
We're doing great. Glad to be here. Paul, John gave me this like extremely small cliff notes of your history and I mean like 4 words.
Okay.
And now I want to know what. Well, you did you go to college? How did you get into this? I mean, everyone doesn't start as a author, podcaster, landscaping expert. Like, where did it begin?
Yes, sir. I went to Ohio University. In Athens,
Ohio University.
No.
I know. That's the Ohio State.
Everyone relax, man. I didn't know. I thought there was no Ohio State people here that were gonna take offense, and they would just take offense in their car, yelling at their car, and not at us.
Well, the story is because most people don't know this. Ohio University, where I went, was established in 1804, and then Ohio State, which is in Columbus, Ohio, came around after that. But they didn't know how to differentiate themselves, so because Ohio State University or Ohio University is very similar.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we'll be the Ohio State University. And so that joke kind of goes all the way back to the 1800s.
Just add in that article. That is an article. I bet Jamie knows this grammar stuff, but she's hiding in the background.
Well,
Ohio State University. Okay, so you went to Ohio University. What did you know what you wanted to do, like, or what you thought you wanted to do when you went? Or?
I had no idea. It was a foolish decision. I would recommend people going to the trades now out of high school, but I went to college for the ladies and the partying and all the wrong reasons, and I had no idea what student loan debt was. I filled out this thing called a FAFSA, and I thought they just gave you the money, which they do, but then you have to pay it back with interest. So I kind of missed that part. So I get out of college and I had no idea how the real world worked, money, things of that nature. Cause in college, your expenses are very minimal.
When you say get out of college, did you have a degree?
Oh, yes,
Because
sir.
I got out of college once without a degree, but, did you get out with a degree?
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but it took me 5 years. And,
okay.
I graduated from Ohio University and I moved down south to the ATL, but I really didn't know how money worked. So my buddy told me about a multi-level marketing, which I don't necessarily recommend because all my family and relatives, like, I was like the stigma, like, oh, if Paul calls you, don't answer. I was selling vitamins. So that was short-lived and a lot of empty promises there.
Yeah. But this guy from high school wants to catch up. That's awesome. I wonder what he's got going on.
Oh, man.
Tell me more about these vitamins, Paul. What kind of vitamins are we talking about?
They'll change your life, John. They'll change your life.
Okay, but hold on. But it sounds like, did you do well there? Because it's not like no one does well in these things. Sometimes people do really well.
Yeah, I think my best month ever, I made $1,500, and I burned through my cousin Pookie, my uncle. I called everybody, and finally I burnt some bridges there, and it wasn't making ends meet, but it was my main job. And Craigslist was a big thing back then, so I would like flip couches. If I'd find a couch on the side of the road, I'd go on Craigslist and I sell it. And I mean, I was doing anything to make money. And my mortgage was $928. Not my mortgage. Like, it was a long story short. But my friend, he moved out west, which he considered West Kansas City. But he moved out to Kansas City for a year to do work on his music career. So he's like, hey, can you stay at my house for a year? The mortgage is $928. As long as you can cover that, you can stay here till we come back. So I was like, sure. So I moved into his house and I had to pay him $928. And I didn't have the full $928. My account, I rarely got to see over $1,000 in my checking account back in those days. So I was like, how am I going to legally come up with $928 by, I think it was May 1st. And so he had a lawnmower in his garage and I knew how to cut grass. So I just started walking around the neighborhood, knocking on doors saying, hey, I can cut your grass, and I was chucking the truck, $25 cut, $30 cut. And I just hustled sunrise to sunset, cutting grass in the neighborhood to try to make the $928. And I did. I paid my friend, and then it was the spring rush. So, they're like, hey, come back next week, same time, same deal. So the next thing you know, I started a lawn care business. I printed out these raggedy little cards that said Paul Jamison Lawn Care off. I think it was called Vista Print for free.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I had your thing, the good contractor. I was the jackleg bad contractor, man. I was doing everything wrong. So that was my humble beginnings.
Did your customers hate you? Right? Or did you come back? Did they say, oh, you can come back and cut my grass? Because there's sort of like running a bad business and not knowing what you're doing. And then there's being sort of deliberately scammy or you know what I mean? Like cutting corners.
Right. Now I did cutting corners for lawn care. I did grow up working at a golf course and had that meticulous, like I took pride in making the yard look nice. But I didn't have the business acumen because when I was in high school, I worked at Best Burger, and I actually got fired from there, which is embarrassing. Talk about a low point in life. I've been fired
from a restaurant. Come on.
And then in college, I worked at the dining hall. And so I think I was making $8 an hour at Best Burger, maybe like $10, $11 an hour at the dining hall. So I had this employee mentality where you as a CEO, your payroll is probably massive, like all these people you have to pay, and you think like a CEO because that's what you are. Well, I thought like an employee. So I thought I was used to making $11 an hour. This yard only takes me 45 minutes, and I'm charging $25. I thought I was ripping them off. Whereas at the time I started, the average man-hour rate for lawn care in Atlanta was $45 per man-hour. I had no idea what that meant. So of course they wanted me to come back to answer your question. I had Mrs. Stewart, I had Reggie, I had this lady named Maria, and they were loving it. The neighborhood kid essentially was cutting their grass for dirt cheap. So I had.
Well, what was the turning point? Did it go sideways, or did you what was the thing that led to you kind of like understanding business?
Yes, sir. So it was twofold. There are two things that happened that really changed the trajectory of my business. Number one, I had a friend, Kenny. At the time, he had 18 years of experience, and he was working in Country Club of the South, which is Justin Bieber lived in there at the time. Whitney Houston, before she passed away, she lived in there. Usher, he still lives in there, I believe. But just like the biggest celebrities in Atlanta lived in this neighborhood. And his workers were from Guatemala, so they didn't know how to drive the Isuzu box truck thing. It's a big old landscaping truck. And so once a week, I would go work for Kenny because I had a driver's license and I knew how to drive the big old truck. And so I would get to work in this fancy neighborhood. They use what called reel mowers, which cuts the grass like a golf course. And so I really learned and he was like, yeah, this customer, I charge them $900 a month. I'm like, $900 a month. Like Kenny was basically taking me under the ropes, and he knew that I wasn't going to be a long-term employee for him because I had my own thing. But he really helped teach me, here's how you do a good maintenance. Here's how you charge them per month. And I was in the nicest neighborhood in Atlanta, arguably in the Southeast. And so that really, really helped me. But what really turned the page is in 2012, I moved out of my buddy's house. I moved into an apartment in Duluth, Georgia. And I had this crazy neighbor, never knew what he did all day because he never worked. And I'd always see him. His name's Vic. And he's always smoking a cigarette, never worked. And I came home from lawn care all day, sweating, tired, long day. And he's sitting there smoking. He's like, hey, can you help me move a couch? And I said, sure, man. And so I thought he meant in his apartment, like I was going to move a couch for him. So he's like, get in my car. So he had this rusty Toyota Camry or Corolla, whatever it was. It was super rusty and old. And so I get in this. I have no idea where I'm about to go, like what we're about to do. Like this seems super sketchy. And this guy, I just have, I don't know if in your gut you've ever been like, this is a bad decision.
Yeah.
Run. I had all those feelings. And I get in this Camry with this guy who seems sketchy, and we start driving. And the next thing we know, we get to another country club. It's called Sugarloaf Country Club. Now, Little Bow Wow lived in this neighborhood, and different celebrities, but it was on a little bit different part of Atlanta, different area, but still mansions, nice neighborhood, rich and famous, and live in this neighborhood. So we drive through this neighborhood, and I was like, who's this couch for? He's like, oh, my sister. She lives in here. So we drive up to her humongous house, and it was true. I helped her move the couch. He just didn't explain to me it was for his sister. But while we were in there, I had my marketing moment, like shoot your shot. So I just said, hey, who takes care of your lawn? And she's like, oh, so-and-so, but we're actually the contract ends soon. We're taking bids. And I just shot my shot. And I was like, hey, I can make this place look even better. Gave her the whole, I just marketed myself. And she's like, cool. She's like, send me a bid. Here's my email. And so I did. Long story short, Luke, I got the job, and she turned out to be a real estate agent in that neighborhood. So quickly, I went from working in the hood for Reggie and Mrs. Stewart and Maria and old Les. I had this guy on Social Security, Les, who had snakes in his yard. And like, I had these crazy customers that are not my ideal customers. And all of a sudden, I started working in the Sugarloaf Country Club. They had Tiger Woods would come there for the PGA golf tournament. It was I forget what it's called, the Bell South Classic or something. But like,
yeah, that's a famous course, Sugarloaf.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tiger Woods would be there once a year in all the PGA Tour golfers or whatnot, and it's a beautiful course.
So you got in there. What kept you in there? Like did she help you get around to the rest of them?
Yeah,
like, how did that look to go from?
So there's 1,000 homes in this neighborhood, and it started with her, and then it quickly went to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the coolest story. This is the best story of my life. But one of the people that lived in this neighborhood, we'll just call him. His real name's Kim. I'm not gonna tell you his last name, but he is a CFO. Financial officer in Silicon Valley for companies that you've all heard of. This guy is so rich that he bought a second house or third house, whatever it is, in Sugarloaf Country Club, and he goes there for the Masters week, and he takes all his rich friends to the Masters, and they go golfing, and he'll come in for like the member guest golf tournament. Anyway, this guy's wealth is at another level, the 1% of the 1%. But anyway, he went to Google and typed in lawn care, Duluth, Georgia, and I ranked in the top 3. And he called me. I called him back right away, and I got his yard, long story short. Well, because I knew he was never there, we would go do his property on Saturday mornings because nobody wants you to, be making noise at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning. But I knew no one would probably mind because no one was there. So I would go to this guy's house every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. And one day I ran up to the Home Depot, and my buddy Robert, who's working with me at the time, he worked an electrician job all week, but he'd work with me on Saturdays, and he's a handyman. He's just great guy. And he called me when I was at Home Depot. I was like, Robert would never call me. He's just a go-getter. He's just going to figure it out. I was like, why is he calling me? He's like, hey, Paul. He says, the neighbor's here. She's really upset with you. And he puts her on the phone, and she starts chewing me out like, why you wake us up every Saturday morning, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I'm so sorry. So I immediately drive back from the Home Depot, and I go, and I pick Robert up to go to the next property. I'm like, we're not gonna make noise at this house anymore at this time. But I just had an instinct to go apologize to the neighbor. So I knocked on the door, and I said, hey, I'm the owner of the lawn care company. I'm so sorry. The reason we go there every Saturday morning is because they don't live there. I mean, they live there, but they're never there. And she's like, oh, that made sense. I always wondered why I never saw him. And I kind of told her who he was or whatever. And she's like, well, thanks for apologizing. And she's like, by the way, you did a great job, because we did a big landscaping job for her neighbor. And she's like, by the way, you guys did a really good job. We just don't like that you crank your blower up at 8 a.m. every Saturday morning. So I said, I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again. We'll reschedule that yard for, during the middle of the week in the afternoon. And she said, hell, by the way, she's like, what you did for them, we're thinking about, give us a quote for us. So long story short, he was the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. I had no idea, because I wasn't following football like that. And I get the job for him, the person who complained. I end up getting the job. And then he referred me to the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, a bunch of the Atlanta Falcons players. I would go to the games the year they went to the Super Bowl. I was down in the locker room after the NFC Championship with the defensive coordinator, because I would drive his wife and all their girlfriends to the game. They like to drink, and then I'd drive them all home afterwards. So it was a wild story.
Designated driver. You're covering a lot of territory.
Yeah.
Look, so what? It sounds like you started, like, as you said, shooting your shot. You're just like, hey, I've got the chance. I'm in front of these people. I just helped him move a couch, so I maybe have some amount of goodwill built up. And you made the offer. You got the job. And then in this case, kind of like the expansion is, seemingly kind of owning it. Just because I had this question in my mind when you said they're not home. I'm like, well, are their neighbors home? Like, is someone they might not be home. And so I got to picturing like, well, maybe it's like 5 acre. This guy's the richest dude ever. Maybe no one's around anywhere. But through causing a problem, but then handling it the right way, that seemed to be like a turning point. Why is everyone referring you to the next person? Like, do you know what they're saying to each other when they're like, is it Paul does a great job? Is it like, what is the thing? Because it's not like I refer people. Just yesterday, I referred the guy who, or the company that painted my house to someone else here, and a previous person who I'd referred that company to chimed in to refer them because, and what did I say? I'm like, man, they were so nice to my wife, my kids. Every day, they just cleaned up everything really well. They did a great job. I mean, I don't know that I can tell good painting from bad outside of like really bad and really good, but everything about the experience was just great and seamless and felt easy. And I'm like, that's why I'm wondering, because it's one thing, anyone can get like an opportunity, but then to turn that opportunity into being in the Atlanta Falcons locker room, that's not just like, this thing. So like, what was it about what you were doing that kept going?
Yes. So Renee's the lady who her husband is a defense coordinator for the Falcons. He's with the Indianapolis Colts now. Those coaches kind of move around every few years. And it took years from me being their lawn guy to me kind of being a family friend and, going to the Falcons games and all of that. But in this neighborhood, and I'm sure other country club style neighborhoods have something similar, they had what was called the Sugarloaf Women's Club. And so these women had I guess it would be similar to like a Facebook group, but it was on their network. And the only way you could be in the Sugarloaf Women's Club is you have to actually be, a resident and a woman, in the neighborhood.
Then you can get in.
So they message forth all day long. Hey, we're looking for a good babysitter. Don't hire Lauren because she'll be on her phone all day. Okay, good to know. We're looking for a good painter. And they just talk all day like, hey, we're playing tennis, or this was before pickleball, but hey, we're playing tennis at noon, and all these women, these rich women, they have a stroller for their dog. Like, it's a whole nother world in these neighborhoods. Like, you'll see this, you'll see this beautiful woman walking what you thought was her baby, and then, the little dog is in the stroller. But the lifestyle of the rich and the famous. But what happened in that Sugarloaf Women's Club, and this goes back to my training working at a country club when I was in middle school and high school. I worked at Congress Lake Country Club in Hartville, Ohio. So they taught me etiquette. Like, I had you had to wear a golf shirt. You had to wear khaki pants. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Like I learned I would have got fired if I wasn't super, super professional in the country club etiquette. So that, to me, that was common sense. I wore a golf shirt as part of my uniform. I wore khaki shorts in the hot summers in Atlanta. I wore khaki pants, in the fall, in the cooler seasons.
Yep.
And everything I did was just very, very professional. And so these women, I think I earned trust with Renee and her other friends because I was extremely professional. And I made it super simple for them. I just had them put a card on file. So it was like, hey, it's going to be $400 a month. And I'd set them up a card on file, and I never bothered them. They didn't have to worry about other things. And so that was a big, big, big advantage of my professionalism. And also, there was only really a few other, Russell was in there, Gibbs. You probably don't know these names because they're in Atlanta, but Crabapple, these companies do like $15, $16 million a year revenue. And I was just a step away from being a chuck in the truck. So I was actually I was in the neighborhood Monday through Friday from the time the gate would open at 8 a.m. till late in the afternoon. So they would see me, they would see my face, they would see my truck, they would see, I was like, that was the only neighborhood I really worked in. And these other companies, that were huge, their employees, they all kind of looked the same, but they weren't. I had a huge advantage of actually Paul. Like I was, I was the one.
There. Well, and I mean, you were there, known, seemingly respected. Sounds like you might have a way with the ladies, and you're impeccably dressed. So I mean, I can see how that's a win. And I like to golf. And I was telling someone the other day, one of my buddies actually who works here is a member at like the fanciest country club in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is Lincoln Country Club, or Country Club of Lincoln, as they call it, because they're snooty. And I've been over there a handful of times golfing, and the level of service that you receive at a nice country club is almost embarrassing if you haven't been around it. It's like it is just all oriented toward this service and this quality of service and this sort of like being on the ball, being helpful. And even the way that you see people, it's not at all disrespectful, but they'll just be like, hey, can you grab me X? They just ask people to do things that you would never walk into a store and ask someone to do. And it just kind of becomes this thing that if you're not either in some sort of high society or really like to golf enough that you're willing to spend that kind of money on it, you don't probably like even come up against this level of service. But I think of something like Chick-fil-A, like places that have taken this sort of attitude towards service. And Chick-fil-A is one of the most impressive companies in the world to me. The ability to scale this sort of culture and like this service and this experience that you can deliver at X thousand restaurants where kind of people feel like you care about taking care of them and this whole thing. And it sounds like you took that you kind of learned at a country club, this kind of like, I don't know, you called it like kind of professionalism and this like way of going about service. And it sounds like it, not just a front, but following through.
Right.
That like you bring that and then you get it done. And that just, especially in this country club neighborhood, that just worked.
It's a perfect marriage because these folks want punctuality and they want professionalism. And that is what I knew. So, for example, John, not John, the podcast host here, but my customer, John, on Thursday mornings at 11 a.m., his wife had a book club. So I knew never be there on Thursday. And so I'd make sure, every Wednesday I was at his house. And if it ever rained on Wednesday or whatever, I was always very communicative. Hey, we had a washout yesterday. I'll be there Friday morning. And so like little stuff like that just set me apart because I understood what punctuality was. If you were scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m., we were there at Thursday at 9 a.m. every week because these people, like my one customer has a tennis court in their backyard and they have the tennis coach and they, you don't want to be there when the tennis coach is like, all this stuff that other people would roll their eyes at. To me, it was so effortless. And so the professionalism,
it just was part of the deal.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I just want to point this out. I'm not his friend John that lives at Sugarloaf Country Club. That in no way is me. I do not live at a country club.
He doesn't like Jack Johnson.
Right. So now My life goal may be to be like Paul's friend John that lives at Sugarloaf Country Club, but I'm not there currently. I just want to point that out.
That's not you. But hey, okay,
No.
so you're doing this country club thing. And now you're sitting here on this podcast, and I think we might have, I don't know if we called you a best-selling author. You're a selling author. You're coaching. Like, how did that start? And when did that start to where you kind of like, it's one thing to level up in the landscaping business, but then to level up in I'm saying up, but kind of like transition, at least to some degree, to, above the business or helping other people. Like, how did that even begin?
Yeah, so I had my nose to the ground building my business in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I didn't have time for social media. I didn't even, I rarely did the whole social media thing. I did have Snapchat because a few of my other friends who owned successful businesses, that was the best way for us. We had a little group chat on Snapchat, so we would send each other snaps back and forth. And every now and again, I think it was called a story before Instagram stole the story from Snapchat. Snapchat had stories. So I would post, and my customers, Mark had a Rolls Royce. I remember my brother came down for spring break. And I'm answering your question how I tied this all together. But
you're good.
My brother came down for spring break because he just wanted to come down where it's warmer weather. He's from the Ohio State University. So he came down to Atlanta.
I can know why you want to leave that dump.
to come where warm weather for the week. And I was like, hey, I'm going to put you boys to work. Him and his buddy, KZ, who now works for Barstool Sports.
Okay.
But they came down for spring break. I was like, y'all can come down, but we're working. So anyway, I had him doing a sod job in this neighborhood. And this black, I don't know Rolls Royce. I think it's called a Ghost or something. This is this fancy.
I feel like I can imagine the name. If my 11-year-old was here, he would immediately be telling us
if
what
my
it was
9-year-old was here with Luke's 11-year-old, they love it.
Anyway, we're talking like a murdered out Rolls Royce.
Yeah, and this guy is a music producer for these famous rappers and all these. I think the majority of rappers live in Atlanta. But this is like those guys' manager, boss type guy. Okay. And he lives in this country club, so he's rolling through with his Rolls Royce. And my brother and KZ, they ain't never seen a Rolls Royce like that. Those aren't just strolling around Ohio. So they're like, oh my gosh, the Rolls. They're all taking pictures for their girlfriends and stuff like a Rolls Royce. So Mark rolls up all slow, and he rolls the window down, and he's like, hey, Paul. And they're like, what? They're like freaking out because he's talking to me like he's my boy. And he's like, he had a question for me about his backyard because he's my customer. But he just told me, hey, Paul, when you getting those rocks in the back by the pool? And my brother and KZ were like, what just happened? Like, the guy with the Rolls Royce is cool with Paul. So anyway, I would occasionally show stuff like that on Snapchat. Like, these yards are very, 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 very nice. And some of my customers one guy had a Lamborghini, I think it's called a Ferrari, but he couldn't park them all, so he had a stack in his garage where they would stack on top of each other. Like, that's the kind of wealth that's in this neighborhood. And that's why I tell all my listeners on my podcast, go where the money is. Like, these people spend their money and they have it. Like, you want to work in the wealthiest neighborhood in your area. But anyway, people would be like, dude, what's this neighborhood? Where do you work? Like, this stuff's crazy. And so I saw that people were kind of curious, like, about my business. And so I started a podcast. It couldn't have been a better idea. In 2018, Joe Rogan had a podcast. I think maybe no one else did. Like, no one was podcasting in 2018. So I just started podcasting, and I was like, hey guys, here's how I got. I just shared the stories I shared with you, and here's what I learned. And I was just sharing, like, have a card on file and make their life effortless, like, easy and convenient. And so I just started sharing this podcast in 2018. And the downloads, it was stunning to me because the show, we were getting like 162,000 downloads a month talking about a lawn care business. And in the charts on the Chartable, we were in the top 100. There's one week, it was Dave Ramsey's podcast. What's the guy's name? Robert Kawasaki. My name was in between those guys. And my producer sent a screenshot. And he's like, dude, this podcast is really, really growing. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And so I started a podcast at the right time. And so if you type in the word lawn care into podcast, my show is going to probably pop up first because we have over 1,000 episodes. And then from there, they're like, well, you should do Instagram. So I got an Instagram and I started posting videos and pictures on there. And then that blew up. And then I did the whole tickety talk thing and YouTube. And so I kind of built out the other social medias, and that stuff just exploded because I was sharing my secrets. I'm like, well, here's what I charge for a mulch installation. Here's what I charge for sod. Here's what I charge for, a mow edge trim blow. And like I was sharing, because none of these people were my competition, because they couldn't, even if they showed up to Sugarloaf, the security guard was like, there's gates there. Like there's no way they could be my competition.
Let me ask you this, Paul. So I think the success is amazing. What I think is even cooler of the people that Luke and I have talked to is those that have gone out and said, I can make this an arm of my business to help other people who are at varying stages of either getting into landscaping. Maybe they're starting a business from day one. Maybe they've had an existing one for 10 years and they've run into issues and they are looking for help. But aside from like those that are what I would call the fairly obvious stories, which is kind of the, they listen to my podcast and they had great success. What are the ones that you have heard from people that have consumed your podcast, Instagram, your tips, that have been the most like heartfelt and meaningful to you versus just, hey, Paul, thanks, I made an extra 26 grand. But are there ones that where you actually changed people's lives, in a way that kind of blew you away?
Yeah, so the coolest testimonial I have of sharing a piece of content and it helping somebody is a fellow named Braden. I met him at the Equip Expo in Louisville last October. He came up to me, and he comes up to me. I was at the jobber booth, and he came up to me. He's like, "Hey, man, I know you don't know me, but I just want to introduce myself to you and let you know that you made me $200,000 last year." And he's with his dad, and I was like, "There's no way." I was like, $200,000? Like, what are you talking about? And he said, "My dad's owned this business for 32 years, and the prices have never changed. So the $40 cut, the guy just kept, I love Mrs. Wilson." So he just kept charging the same price. Well, on my podcast, I trumpet this message that every year in the spring in our industry, raise your prices at least 5%, but maybe even more. But train your customers that every spring before the season starts, your price is going to bump up just a little bit. You're just going to raise your price every year. And then like the year when things got kind of squirrely, I encourage people to raise it more than 5%. But that's my message. So I share about it all the time. I was like, raise your prices every spring. Raise your prices every spring. And I tell them a little template they can send out about explaining to your customers to absorb your expenses that are rising. You have to raise your price and make it, I want to continue to provide you a high quality of service, but our costs are going up. So therefore, to absorb that, we have to raise our prices. So Braden takes that message, and for the first time in 32 years, they did $1 million in revenue the year before. He sends out the letter that I told him what to send out. I was like, say this. He says exactly what I say to say. Out of all of his customers, 8 customers canceled because we're not, we've always paid $40. We're not going to pay you $44 or whatever. And so 8 people left, and then he kept the same other ones. So he did less work, and then off that customer base, they earned $200,000 more because they raised their prices across the board. And his dad was sitting there, and his dad's older, and I think they passed him the baton to Braden now. But his dad was like, "How can I ever thank you? Can I take you out for steak dinner? Like what?" And he was like trying to find out a way, like, "Can I give you money? Can I give you a dinner? Like, what do you want? You changed our business." I was like, to me, it's common sense. Like, raise your prices every spring. And I was like, you don't have to give me anything. I was like, I'm happy that you raise your prices and like you're succeeding. And so that fueled me to keep, even though I say the same thing every spring, I'm like, guys, don't forget to raise your prices this season. It's like, you never know who's listening, and these simple little, I'm not teaching my audience to do backflips and jump through this hoop and that. It's like simple little things like that.
It's hard to ask for money, though. I get it. Like, we've raised our prices a few times. There's always a little pain in it. Like, it's hard to do. And I know my wife did a little. She's super into like nutrition, and she'll read textbooks about it. She really likes it. And she was doing a little coaching for people, and charging anyone any money at all. Mm-hmm. It was like a hurdle she had to get over. Like, it's hard. And especially if you've been doing something a certain way for a while, that you're going to get, even if you don't get any attrition, that like, it's not anything anyone wants to hear that your price is going to go up, but you can't, like, they're not going to stop printing money. They're printing money nonstop, forever. That's what they do. And your costs are going to go up. And if you don't go up with it, you're going to get left behind, and you're going to be making it harder and harder on yourself to keep up. And like you said, doing less work to get more money is kind of what everyone wants. Like, I think I saw it on it was probably TikTok or something, but it was said, like, watch out for like a smart, lazy, ambitious person. The idea that like when you're trying to figure out how to do less to make more, that's where you come up with new ideas and you learn new things.
And I think, to Paul's point, I think the biggest fear with taking the leap of raising the prices is what he started with, that they said, I had 6 people cancel. Because in their mind, and Paul can tell me if I'm wrong, but as a business owner and as people, you're going, well, I'm worried about the people that left. They're not thinking about the people that exist that are paying more willingly and probably paying more the next year and so on and so forth. They're just immediately fearful of those that email back going, well, I paid this and I'm out of here. And it's like, getting people just to bite that bullet, to me, seems like the biggest challenge to the entire thing, because we personally go, if I have a cancel, that means I lose money. They're not looking at it big picture that way.
Well, and it's a version of firing your worst customers. You're now, the next time when they get that letter next year and it goes up 5%, is it going to be 8 or is it going to be like 1 or 2 or 0? Because these are people who are less price sensitive, and you're sort of, I don't know, seemingly immediately in a better spot. But we had a group of people come through our office yesterday that are starting. They're doing like a startup, like they're starting businesses, and they're part of some program here. And anyway, they came in here. They wanted to get the wisdom from the local genius, right? John knows this. Not really any sort of.
How do I turn off my camera? Hold on.
Not a widely recognized genius, just a local. This is my running joke because I think it's hilarious.
Genius,
being a local
genius is a strong word. It's a strong word.
It's but appropriate, John.
Highly inaccurate. Yeah.
I like it, so I'm going to keep saying it. The point is, I was talking to them about, like, it's so much easier to imagine the downside of a thing than it is to kind of imagine to picture the future of what's possible. Like, okay, we raise our price. Yeah, I can run that in a spreadsheet really quick, or kind of just like imagine if everyone paid, $10 more, what would I kind of end up with? But it's really easy to imagine everything going wrong than to kind of like picture it going really well, or even to imagine the second order, like, good things that happen in that kind of situation. Like, and I don't know. I love that. I love that you have people doing that.
And what I've told Luke before, it's like my whole point of dreamers need doers and doers need dreamers. And not always, but the doers typically are like, I'm going to point out, as I execute this, I'm going to point out where this could really go wrong. They're not thinking in a big picture global mindset, which a lot of small business owners are that way, right? We're used to going out, doing the work. We're not thinking about, these are all the ways this could succeed. We're thinking about, I have to avoid this, and this so I can pay the bills. And so I always say that balance of having multiple people with different mindsets is probably equally important. But Paul, you can tell me if you've encountered something different.
Luke mentioned Chick-fil-A earlier, but what their prices were 10 years ago for the chicken sandwich, they just incrementally, you never even really notice it, but the price went up a little bit. $5.89. Next thing you know, it's $6.11, and then next thing you know, several years later, it's $8.12 for the number one or whatever. And it just keeps, but it's so incremental, and their prices never went backwards. It's always gone up a little bit. And rent at apartments here in Atlanta in 2012, when I moved into my apartment, it was $1,200. Now, Atlanta is a big city, bigger than Lincoln or whatever. It's probably more expensive here than in other parts of the country, but $1,200 back then. Now, if you go to get the same size apartment in Atlanta, it's $2,200.
Yep.
And it's gone up every year, and they just train their tenants. Rent is going to go up next year, not down. Chick-fil-A trains their customers, prices going up, and in the trades, so many folks, they just, I charge $40 this year, I'll charge $40 next year. And it's like, no, we have to train our customers. No one goes into Chick-fil-A throwing up their fists like, I can't believe you guys raised your price. And nobody does that with rent. They keep selling these apartments. But in the trades, we have to train our customers that, Mrs. Smith, you can expect as sure as the sun's going to come up and the grass is going to grow next spring, my prices are going up. And you just train your customers. That's part of doing business with me. But of course, you don't raise it by a lot.
Yeah, I like to shake my fist at the sky at the Federal Reserve. I think we should get into it a little bit. Creature from Jekyll Island. If you want to read a book in your life, John, get to learn a thing or two about the cabal that prints money and runs this world, John.
I don't have time to read. I have to work, these devilish hours at CompanyCam.
But okay, so do you do, Paul? Okay, so you get online. You're running the business, you're doing some social media stuff, and it sounds like, hey, I mean, you're a compelling guy, you've got things to say, and good advice to give, and you're also, there's these advantages of being in a place that's like glamorous, like there's interesting things happening that isn't, that could kind of, in a sense, like give you a leg up on, like you were saying, Snapchat, Instagram, etc. Do you do coaching? Like, are you helping people? Like in a sense, one-on-one-ish, or like in these courses. And I really want to I am going to lead with the end of my question, which is, I hear people say all the time, oh, I don't want to give away my secrets. Oh, I don't want to, I want people to follow me because I want to do coaching, but I don't want to let them know, I can't give them everything, all the information or whatever, which I think is, I understand that thinking, but I think it is preposterous because no one gives a crap about you. No one cares about what you know. Only thing they're looking for is to find someone that they trust. Do they trust that you can help their business? Mm-hmm. And you can give away, in my opinion, every piece of information you ever know, every secret, every idea, and only more people will want you to help them. And I'm curious if that's how it happened for you, and you're not morally obligated to agree with me, even though I was yelling really loudly. How did you get into this coaching from the social media?
Yeah, I just listened to my audience. So it started with that price increase letter that Braden got, because I was talking about it on my podcast, and people were like, well, I don't know what to say. And I would tell them, I would just, I would send them a little Snapchat and say, hey, my prices are going up. All my costs are rising. I have to absorb all my costs. So in order to keep giving you the highest quality service possible, I have to raise my prices. And so I would tell them that, and they would still be like, well, can you just send it to me? And so I had to email them the exact email that I would send out to my customers. And then finally, my buddy Julio Tomei in Vancouver, he's like, well, just make it downloadable, and then they can just buy it from you. Yeah. So I was like, okay, you think someone would actually pay for that? And he's like, yeah, probably. So I had a little raggedy website back then, and I figured out how to do a little digital download. And the next thing you know, these things are selling like hotcakes. I'm getting these testimonials. Hey, thanks so much, man. They were thrilled. It transformed, helped them raise their price. So that was my very first digital product, is my price increase letter. And to this day, that's been the most popular product. And then started listening to my audience. They have so many questions about numbers. How much do I charge and why? What should I be charging? I can't tell you how many, DMs I answer about the number side of things. And so I created a course called Know Your Numbers, and we literally go through how to calculate your break-even man-hour rate, and it's like math class, and people just consume this Know Your Numbers course, and they love it. And then with the mentorship thing, I do one-on-one coaching where I help folks, and my buddy Jonathan Potoshnik, he started and sold Service Autopilot, but he's a wonderful mentorship program, so he's kind of helping me behind the scenes of how to do a one-to-many coaching program, which I'm going to be rolling out later this summer. But yeah, I just listened to my audience, and they wanted to know how to raise their prices. So I created a product. I solved their problem. I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. And then I listened to my audience. They had a problem about their numbers. So I created a product about that, Know Your Numbers course. And this whole coaching thing, I just don't have enough time in my day to coach everybody who wants me to coach them. So I'm trying to solve that problem. But I do actively coach folks who own lawn care businesses. And here's the thing, Luke and John, guys' businesses are just, they have this operational chaos. They don't have card on file. They don't have good billing policy. Everything's just in a little bit of a chaos. So I help them go from that operational chaos to really get everything streamlined and make it more efficient. And that makes it more profitable. So it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's been fun helping people. And that's what, I'm going to continue to do is help lawn care business owners go from operational chaos to streamlined efficiency. And it brings me satisfaction to watch their transformation.
Paul, that is so cool. Kind of recapping this whole thing, when you look back at where you began at Ohio University, not the Ohio State University, but at Ohio University, and you look at where you are now, I know as we get older, sometimes we take a step back, and it was because life's a whirlwind, and it was like, man, that was going fast. How do you look back on the last several years in this career and moving a couch and Sugarloaf Country Club? Like, do you ever take a step back and think about, I mean, I'm sure we all do, but how do you look at the journey you've been on?
Yeah, I fell in love with entrepreneurship because when I started and I needed that $928, my brain, if you would have saw inside of my brain, it was an employee's brain. It was a poverty mindset. I didn't understand how to serve people like so excellently, like in my thoughts. And over the last 14, 15 years, I have absolutely fell in love with business. Like I could not imagine not being a small business owner. Like I would be. You could offer me. Luke could offer me $1 million to come work at CompanyCam. I would be miserable. I have to own a business. Like
everyone here is. You'd fit in.
Well, I'm just saying, and if your audience in Good Contractors, these guys all own businesses. Like the folks I run with, like we are so passionate about our business. Like I found what I was called to do, and I absolutely love it. So. Fast forward 14 years later, like I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful that I'm an entrepreneur and I'm running my business. It was several years in that storyline where I made mistakes. I could tell you, crazy stories of getting tax bills I didn't have the money saved for, and stress and employees. I had one guy, he was in the middle of trimming a bush. It was like 95 degrees in Atlanta, and he was going through stuff with his ex-wife, and he was just having a bad day. And halfway through trimming this big holly bush, he just quit. He's like, boss man, I'm done. And he throws his hedge trimmer down and just quits in the middle of trimming this bush. And I got all this kind of stories like that. I don't want to make it sound all glamorous. Like, yeah, business is simple. Like I could tell you horror stories all day long. But to answer your original question, I have fell in love with business, with entrepreneurship, and I can't be any more grateful for being able to do what I love every day. It's an amazing opportunity.
That's awesome.
Well, now that before we ask you the question, and Luke gives his rating that we do on everything, I am putting some time on the calendar for Luke about this $1 million job at CompanyCam. I'm really excited about the possibilities here now that I know this exists. So this is fantastic. Thanks, Paul, for teeing that up. No, we always ask everybody, and we've stuck mics in the faces of people at trade shows who are in the trades, but in your mind, Paul, if you were describing what makes a good contractor, what are those attributes deep down, from A to Z? What is a good contractor according to Paul Jamison?
Yeah, I would say three things. Number one, quality. Whether you're painting a house or you're mowing your yard or you're cleaning someone's gutter, like the prerequisite is you have to do a quality job. And that alone will set you apart from the competition because it's so hard for people to get that concept. Number two is punctuality. It's crazy how many times people will say to me, the guy who's the CFO, and just to put this into perspective, he had the opportunity to be the CFO of Google. He's with a different company, but I'm telling you, this is one of the richest men in America. And he literally told me, because he lives in his fancy, crazy house in San Jose, California, he went on Google and he typed in lawn care in Duluth, Georgia. And the guy who was ranking number one, he called. They didn't call him back right away. He called number two. They didn't call him back right away. I was third, which is still something to be proud of. Yeah, that I was ranked number three, which is a whole nother story for another day about how to rank in Google. But anyway, I was number three. He called me. I recognized I think it was a 949 area code or something like that, and I listened to the voicemail right away, and when he said the street name that he lived on, I was, oh, crap, I know that street. I called him back right away, and because I called him back, I got that job, and because I got that job, I got the defensive coordinator's job, and then it just spirals out of control. So to answer your question is punctuality. If you do a good job and you actually are punctual, you answer your phone, you call your customers back, you will be shocked at how much business you can get. And then number 3, and the last one is professionalism. Just like be professional. The trades, we have such a bad reputation because guys have their boxers hanging out of their pants and they got a black and mild on their ear and they got their raggedy t-shirt on. Like don't be that guy.
Well,
Love
Luke,
that.
it's your turn. We always let Luke vote somebody whether he thinks they're a good contractor with the thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I don't know if he's ever going to do it's a thumbs up.
Let's go.
It's a thumbs up. I should have given that other guy a thumbs down that we argued about the Midwest. But no, Paul, Paul clearly has it working. Like in those, I tell a lot of people like that. It is simple. Like sometimes you got to learn the work. Like day one, you show up. Are you going to be able to do absolute quality landscaping job?
Yeah.
Probably not. But this is learnable. But the ability to manage yourself, then the ability to manage other people toward the quality work, the punctuality, like the showing up, and then being professional. Like just what if they saw us all wearing the same basic outfit and we look like an actual team out here doing the work. Like there's all these things that can roll into those 3 things that just make it work. And it will work. You don't have to be a Google genius XYZ thing. The better you are at marketing, the better you are at sales, that can make you grow faster. But if you do great work and you're punctual and you show up and you're professional, you will grow. It will always work. It will never stop working if you do those things. And then everything else you do is something that can just accelerate it, but it is not the thing itself. And so, no, Paul, you're the man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on here. Like this was a great convo. Sorry, John and I talk so much. We're working on it.
Yeah.
But no, this was fabulous. We might need a podcast coach because I think we're getting tens of downloads. No, it's probably more than that. But the point is, like, you're killing it on the podcast, on the helping people grow their business.
No doubt.
And we're just glad you took the time to join us, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, guys.